Good evening, and welcome to the Candidate Forum this evening. First, I have some announcements. I'd ask you to please turn off or silence your cell phones because we don't want the candidates to be interrupted when they speak. And we also have a rule about no campaign literature or other material in the room. If they want to do it outside, it's fine, but you're here to hear the candidates. I'm Jackie Jacobberger, a member of the League of Women Voters of North and Central San Mateo County. And I'd like to say a special thank you to the San Bruno City Council for sponsoring the forum tonight. The League is a nonpartisan political organization. We have both men and women. And our purpose is to promote active and informed participation in government. So we really appreciate it when groups like our sponsor go ahead and put this on because we can't do them all by ourselves. But these are intended to increase the voters' knowledge about the candidates and the issues. Now, the purpose of the Candidates Forum is to provide an opportunity for all the candidates to be heard at one time and to be questioned by you, the audience. And we hope that by bringing the candidates and the voters close face to face, the voters will be informed and they'll make a better decision on election day. So we appreciate your interest in coming out to learn more about the candidates. Tonight you'll hear from candidates for the San Bruno City Council. And I would just like to announce now that we were supposed to have a forum for the mayoral candidates tonight, but one candidate will not decline to appear, and we never do a forum with only one candidate. So tonight we're hearing only the city council members. So we have 3 candidates for 2 seats, and normally the term of office is 4 years, but because there's been a change in the state law, and the state is trying to get us all onto even-numbered years elections, these candidates tonight will serve for only 3 years, and then next year there'll be another election that'll try to get us into sync with them on the, so they'll serve till 2020 instead of 2021. Now, in the interest of time and fairness to the candidates, I'm going to ask you to hold your applause until the end of the forum, and then we'll thank everybody at once. Because the purpose of this is to provide a nonpartisan setting to let undecided voters hear all the candidates and to help them choose. It's not for supporters or opponents of any particular candidate to demonstrate their own personal preferences from the audience. So the candidates in order are Laura Davis, Marco Durasso, and Michael Salazar. And but we don't go in that order to ask our questions. So this forum tonight, each candidate will have 3 minutes for an opening statement. During the question period, each candidate will have 1 minute to answer each question. And all candidates answer every question. And then for the closing statements, the candidates have 2 minutes for that statement. We have a timekeeper tonight. This is Marie Baldessari. She's in the front row here, and she'll hold up a warning sign when the candidate has 1 minute, and then 30 seconds left. And she has then the stop sign when the time's up. And we do let the candidates finish their sentence as long as it's not one of those great big St. Paul sentences. And then we have ushers tonight, Don Jacobberger and Jean Johnson. They have cards for you to write your questions. All the questions from the audience are all in writing. So if you need a card and want to write a question, raise your hand and they'll bring that to you. And when you need it to be picked up, if you'll just raise your hand, they'll come and pick up your question and bring it up to me. I have a heap of them right here already, so I don't think we're going to run out tonight. I want to ask you please to write legibly when you write those questions. Keep them brief, and I will not ask any questions that are of a personal nature or have personal invective in them. So just you know that right off. So all the questions will come to the moderator. I'm going to sort the questions by subject, and I'm going to try to cover a variety of subjects, not just, home in on the same one over and over again. Obviously, looking at this now, I know we won't have time to ask all the questions, and sometimes if there's several on the same topic, I will combine them and rephrase them a little bit. So if you don't hear exactly what you've written on the card, I'm trying to cover a variety of subjects. So what happens? The candidates have drawn lots to determine the order in which they'll speak, and they've already done that. So each candidate has 3 minutes for the opening statement, and our first candidate tonight is Laura Davis. Go ahead.
Thank you, and good evening. Thank you really for being here tonight. I look around and I see a lot of new faces, or I see recognized faces. And I just want to thank the community for your interest in community and what we have to say tonight, because our voices do represent you. And I think that when you go to the polls to make a decision, that you're going to vote based on the best candidate for that job. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. Born and raised here in San Bruno. I had the pleasure of attending all the schools, the public schools here in San Bruno as well, starting with the elementary schools to the Ingvall, to Parkside, Crestmore, and then a graduating class from Cappuccino High School. My father owned a delicatessen in San Mateo Avenue for over 30 years, and we knew what the hard work was about. We knew what it meant to depend on good parking in the downtown areas. We knew what it meant to depend on our customers supporting us. My mom was a Bank of America employee, and we were a close-knit family values. And my start with getting back to the community really started probably in high school when I was involved in the leadership. In my senior year in high school, I was appointed to the San Bruno Citizens Crime Prevention Committee, where I served approximately 10 years. And actually can get emotional thinking about it because I served with Carolyn Livingood, who recently just passed away. But she taught me, as well as other members of the commission or the committee, about giving back and caring about our community. Here I am at 18 years old, and I care about the crime in San Bruno. I was very shocked to learn about what happened behind the scenes, things that we didn't know about. And as I continued and I raised my family and raised my kids, we've continued to live here in San Bruno, and I've continued to give back. So my kids went to St. Robert's, and I've been an athletic commissioner for the past 18 years. My son and my daughter were at Cappuccino High School. I was a sports booster president, and I've also served the past 12 years on the San Bruno Park and Recreation Commission. That's a little bit about me. I'm dedicated. I care. What do I want to see for the City Council? I want to make good decisions that represent the entire community. I want to make decisions that are based on an educated decision. I want to make decisions based on history, knowledge, knowing what works, what doesn't work, why we do certain things, why decisions were made in the past. And I want to work with a collaborative council, one that works together, prioritizes all the city issues, figure out what we need to attack first. There are a number of issues in San Bruno, and I look forward to talking about them tonight. And again, thank you so much for coming out tonight, and I appreciate your concerns.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. And our second candidate is Michael Salazar.
Okay. I'd like to start by thanking the League of Women Voters and the City of San Bruno for putting on this event for every election, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity for the voters to get to know us. I also want to thank everybody who came here tonight and everybody watching at home. I think it's important that you all make informed decisions about your local government, and so your involvement is deeply appreciated. My name is Michael Salazar. I'm a Bay Area native, and my wife Sandra and I chose San Bruno for our home some 15 years ago because we knew this would be a good place to raise our children. And in raising our two boys here, we became very invested in this community. We participate in our church, our schools, and other volunteer activities around the city. In fact, everyone in my family has participated in Operation Clean Sweep several times. I myself have not missed an event since we moved here. Recently, I've been working with several other volunteers at Cappuccino High School to support the school, as well as collaborating on some efforts with the San Bruno Park School District. Previously, I've served on the Crime Prevention Committee, where I chaired the first National Night Out event for San Bruno. Currently, I'm on the Park and Recreation Commission, And recently there, we've designed and planned out the first 2 parks that this city has seen in a long, long time. And I've also served on the city council before for 6 years. And during my term on the city council, we saw some very hard economic times, and I helped shepherd the city through those times. And also during that time, we completed the Caltrain grade separation. We broke ground on downtown's first new development. We undertook the first major infrastructure upgrade program, and we created the San Bruno Community Foundation, which is currently doing some amazing things for our city. Our city currently faces a lot of very complicated issues, and I have experience in analyzing those issues and coming up with the tough decisions that have to be made to solve them. I have the education and the professional experience that have prepared me for the job on the city council, and I believe I have also demonstrated my ability to do the job well. During my time on the council, I earned the respect and the support of many of the local officials in the area, and even more importantly than that, I believe I've demonstrated my commitment to the residents of San Bruno by always keeping my word and listening to all of my neighbors. And I'm running for city council because I do care about my neighbors, and I want to protect San Bruno's quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salazar. Next is Marco Durazo.
I'm sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. My name is Marco Durazo, and I'm running for city council here in San Bruno. And I want to start by thanking the League of Women Voters and everybody here tonight. And I also, as kind of a habit that I have, I wanted to thank my fellow candidates. It's a lot of work to run for an office in San Bruno. You really have to love San Bruno. You really have to be concerned about the future of San Bruno. So my complete respect to individuals sitting next to me who I've got to learn about a little bit on kind of the campaign trail. I love San Bruno. My wife is born and raised in San Bruno. She's a product of the public schools. I haven't been in San Bruno nearly as enough as the other candidates here. I was military family. My father was in the military for 30 years. So we lived kind of all around the country. But we're here raising my children. I have 2 children. My son is 4 years old. My daughter is 8 weeks old. And I'm concerned about the future. I'm optimistic. I love San Bruno. I think it's resilient. I think it has a bright future ahead of it. But I'm running for council because I want to bring a new perspective to the city and to the leadership. I think that we have a set of issues and challenges that we need to address as a community, and I think it's time for a new perspective and a fresh set of eyes to some really enduring old problems in our city. I believe in the city, and I believe in its public school system. I believe in its neighborhoods, and I believe in all the committees that are part of the leadership of the city. I'm on the Traffic Safety and Parking Committee. We spend a lot of time really addressing safety issues in the city. I spent some time in the San Bruno Education Foundation before my son even enrolled in the public schools because I care about our children and I care about our families. There's a lot of issues on the horizon that really made me kind of want to run for city council. As you know, having a child that's 8 weeks old is probably not the most optimal time to run for city council. But I'm concerned about our future, and I want to play a role in shaping our future. When I talk to residents day in, day out, I hear about utility rates. I hear about development. I hear about traffic and safety issues. I hear about parking congestion. I talk to family, and I hear about our downtown and why it's been neglected for so long. So I want to bring solutions, fresh perspective to our city, but I really think it needs a new set of perspective. It needs a new set of eyes, and I think that I bring that. I love San Bruno. I haven't been here for 30 years, but I plan to be here for another 30, so you're going to see a lot more of me. But I'm committed to the city, and I'm committed to our families, and I'm committed to the young people. I'm committed to our seniors, and I think collectively, collaboratively, we can have a better future for San Bruno.
Yeah. And thank you, Mr. Durazo. Now it's time for the candidates to answer your questions. So if you still have one and need it to be picked up, you can raise your hand, and one of our ushers will pick up your question. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the question. I'm going to vary the order in which the candidates are called on to speak, so they're not always in the same order. It's a little more difficult with 3 instead of more. But I just done a random grid here as to how their questions will be asked. So we have lots of questions. I'm sure we won't cover them all, but we will start with the first one. And infrastructure seems to be, a relatively big concern here in the questions. And so a couple of questions here. How do you propose to fund the needed infrastructure? And one person feels that there's ever-increasing fees and taxes that are incurred locally, countywide, and statewide. So how would you finance needed infrastructure? Do you have some ideas on that? And we will start with Marco Durasso.
Sure. So, question about infrastructure, and I think the context is necessary. I think a lot of our concerns, a lot of our challenges with infrastructure have kind of been delayed. The can's been kicked down the road, and a lot of these improvements haven't been implemented in the past. The new council, I think the new leadership will really carry this mandate forward. One of the first ways to, I think, do it more cost effectively is really in the materials and the implementation and the construction costs of infrastructure. I know there's been a council member who's really been advocating to make sure that we're being more cost efficient, that we're looking at every possible way to save money on the implementations that we're required to do. With regards to taxes and different taxes, one of the situations that we had a discussion last night about expanding Skyline Boulevard, and I know there's a lot of county funding that's available to help us implement different things in San Bruno. So we need to be wise about the cost of materials, the cost of construction, and make sure that we're taking advantages of any funding that's really local to San Bruno.
All right. Thank you. Michael Salazar, funding infrastructure.
Okay. So infrastructure has been very important to me for a long time. When I first ran for office in 2005, and I thought even back then that we needed to start making some major investments in the infrastructure, and we finally have gotten to the point where that's happening. But I've also heard a lot of complaints about the fees and the fees getting too high, so we do have to be sensitive to that. I think fees will continue to be an important component in how we fund our infrastructure projects. Because water and sewer are enterprises, the funding is dedicated for those two programs, and so we are very limited in what we can do with the money that comes in there. That money stays in those enterprises, and so anything else that we do, it's separate from the general fund. I agree with Marco that we need to find better efficiencies, and also, there is an opportunity to incur a little bit of debt, and last night the City Council approved a program that would allow the city to incur debt so that we could do programs like fixing our infrastructure and possibly expanding cable. It's something that came up.
All right, thank you. And finally, Laura Davis.
I'm glad the question was asked. One of the things I didn't share in my introduction is that I work for a private water utility company here in they're in San Mateo, based out of San Jose, and I've been with this company for over 17 years. What does it come down to? Let's talk about water, whether it's sewer. You got to pump the water up from our wells. We have to purchase water from San Francisco. Those are costs we really can't get away with. San Francisco Water sells it to us. All on the peninsula, we're going to purchase that water. What do we have control over is our expenses and how we spend our money. So we need to simply look at processes and figure out how we can do that better. In terms of infrastructure over the years, San Bruno, just like you and I, has dealt with the economy that crashed. So it was difficult for a lot of infrastructure to be improved. Yes, the city has looked at a lot of different projects, and they are slated. They're looking at ways to finance that right now. But it is an ongoing issue in all communities and all cities. We live in a community of an aging infrastructure, whether it's sewer lines, water lines. We got to figure out how to do it better and more efficient.
Thank you. All right. Next question. The city manager's contract is up for renewal. If elected, would you approve an extension? Let's see. We'll start with Michael Salazar.
So, first of all, I don't think that the performance of a city employee is an appropriate topic for an open discussion. When performance evaluations are conducted and decisions are made on staff decisions, that's always done in a closed session, and there is a reason for that. Employees have a right to privacy. There is a respect issue, And so I don't think that that would be an appropriate thing to discuss in this forum.
Thank you. And Laura Davis.
I think I agree with exactly with what Michael had to say, but I also look at it this way as well. Think of a principal of a high school. As a parent, we might have issues. I have a number of issues. This principal doesn't do this teacher doesn't do that. But I'm not in the inside. I don't really understand exactly what does happen, and I don't have an opportunity to question her, to know the facts. I don't sit in meetings that are private. I only know what is based on hearsay. And that's, as a council member, that's not how I would work. I want to know the facts. I want to be able to be educated. I want to be able to get the information and then make a decision. So I don't have an opinion on whether or not the city manager's contract should be extended.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, Mr. DeBrasso.
In the work I do nonprofit management. I am sorry about that. In the work I do nonprofit management, and I supervise a staff of 15 people. Folks who work with families, work with kids, work in a school district. So I want to echo a piece of what my peers have said, in that I can't say anything specific because I'm not privy to that information. But what I will say, and I know looking forward to the new council, is that I know that our future mayor, who's in the room, has talked about a visioning process and making sure that the new council is collaborative, working together, and really identifying what the goals are for the city. I think it would be imperative to have that conversation with the city manager to see how that alignment looks like. We want to make sure that our visioning process is set and that every city employee is really playing a role in that process. There has to be alignment. There has to be alignment on the council. There has to be alignment in the city, and we need to be working collaboratively and aligned with our new mayor. So I think that's kind of the conversation I'm looking forward to, without speaking to specifics of anybody's employment status.
Thank you. There are quite a few questions about infrastructure and downtown improvements and that kind of thing. A couple of them is, with parking a major concern in the downtown, would you propose funding a new parking garage? And who should pay for downtown improvements? Laura Davis, you want to take that on?
You know, as a San Bruno resident, we all like to venture outside of San Bruno. Who loves going to Burlingame? Who loves what they've done down there? I do. And I want to see our community really go into our downtown area and support and give back to the community. Let our tax dollars be something that we want to spend here. I look forward to really the new development. With the passing of Measure N, height limits have increased, new developments are coming, it will change. And that needs to be the focus of the current council as well as the ongoing council, that we've got to look at making improvements in San Mateo, on San Mateo Avenue. As a family that owned a business, parking was devastated when they went from parallel diagonal parking to large landscape, removing parking. Our family talked about it and stressed about it night after night after night. I know what it means to have a business there. I also want to see some of the businesses get cleaned up. They pick on businesses for things that really aren't an issue, businesses that can't come in and go through a number of different issues to be able to open up their front doors. I'm interested in helping out the businesses as well.
Thank you. And Mr. DeRosso.
So specifically answer a question about a downtown parking structure. I absolutely would support a downtown parking structure. Question about who would pay for it. I think the community, we need to pay for it. San Bruno, our downtown is part of our city. It's really in the heart of our city. Everyone, it benefits from a more vibrant downtown. But we also have to look at it the way it is now. There's serious parking challenges. We need a parking structure. And I think we also need to learn from neighboring cities on how they've improved their downtown areas. I'm not for one, we have limited money, we have limited time, we have limited resources. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. I know South San Francisco downtown has a parking structure. I know other vibrant communities down south, like in Santa Monica, have a vibrant downtown area near the beach with a parking structure. So we really need to move forward, learn from other communities, and make sure that we're addressing our parking situation. And we also need to prepare for the time where the car is not going to be king. We need to make sure that bicycle paths, pedestrian right-of-ways are implemented in these plans. So question about paying for it, I think parking meters. We need to fund this in different ways and be creative about it. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Salazar.
So we're starting to see some development in the downtown area, and I think parking will be a key component of that. So one thing I would say is that we need to move cautiously because we don't want to overbuild and then not require a lot of parking, because then that would be wasted space. So as we start seeing development come in, I think we need to continuously reevaluate the situation and try to come up with a good number for how many parking spots we would require. I think the city's parking lots that are in that area right now are inadequate and poorly maintained at the time. And I would really put a lot of the burden of developing any new parking on the developers that are coming in. They have the money, they have the resources, and they understand the requirements. So I would put all of the burden on them.
Thank you. Lots of questions here on money, which I guess is typical. This one says, what would you propose to fund or additionally fund unfunded reserves for employee retirement? And that's a kind of a tough one, but Mr. Salazar, you want to take that one?
Yeah, that is a tough one. So during the time that I was on the council, we did fund a number of different reserves, and we did reduce our backlog on what we're putting aside for pensions. But it's a number that continues to grow. Salaries continue to grow, and people live longer, and so that burden is going to be almost impossible to keep up with. I would say that we have to continually keep an eye on it. I believe San Bruno is managing that debt in a very aggressive manner, and I think it's just something that needs to be continually monitored, so that it doesn't get out of hand. But it's always going to require more funding coming in from newer employees to take care of the older employees. But the city does have a responsibility to those people, and I think they need to honor it.
Thank you, Mr. Salazar. Next, Mr. Gerasso.
A question about honoring pension and honoring folks' decades of service to the city is really important to me. The element of security is important to me, whether folks are new to San Bruno or whether they're struggling to find a place to live, or whether they're worried about what their economic situation is going to look like after 20, 30 years of service to our city. So I echo the sentiment about looking for alternative ways of funding this. I echo the sentiment about keeping a close eye on it, but I think security is really underlying my concern. We need to make sure that we honor these commitments to our city employees.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Davis.
Could you imagine working for a company and after 30 years not having the retirement you anticipated? So we're required, and we must ensure that we can fund our retirement benefits. The city's got to simply spend within its means and make sure we need to plan for the future. It is probably the scariest thing of all employees working for any company, and it is something that the city, I know, takes great pride in making sure that we do put money aside for that. How are we going to fund it? How are we going to be creative with that? Some decisions with growth, hiring new employees. We need to be careful about increasing employee numbers because we are living longer. Medical is getting more expensive, so we need to make sure we spend wisely, and that it's not just about hiring new employees. It's about looking at efficiency.
All right, thank you. All right. Let's see. There are a couple of questions here on San Bruno Cable. It says it's facing upgrades and increasing competition. Would you be in favor of raising, and this says, I think it says $10 million to install fiber, or would you be in favor of raising whatever it costs to install fiber? And Mr. Gerasso.
So the question about San Bruno Cable, a little bit of context. Question about fiber. Fiber is really the future. AT&T, as you know, and I'm sure you've seen them, are in many of our neighborhoods installing fiber and essentially luring customers away from San Bruno Cable. I've said this a few different times. I think when we're worried about the $10 million, I get it. It's a very large number. But we're worried about the amount. We're questioning whether we should pursue it. We're sitting here wondering what to do, but AT&T is moving forward. So I think where we as residents in San Bruno sees really limitations and obstacles, I think AT&T sees opportunity. So I am in favor of pursuing fiber. I'm in favor of pursuing means to raise the $10 million. But I think that if you do it, I think that if we pursue it and we raise it, I think the revenue that it would bring back to San Bruno Cable and really that market share that we're losing literally every day would in itself recoup those fees. So I'm in favor of it. I think we need to pursue it. And I wouldn't be drawn away by the $10 million. I think we would be recouping it.
Thank you. Ms. Davis.
I mean, I think it's pretty amazing to have our own cable company in San Bruno. How many cities would love to be at the point we're at? Many. Yes, we need to invest in our infrastructure. So what's been happening with San Bruno Cable, as we earn money and we gain money, it goes right back into our general fund. San Bruno Cable needs to make sure the money stay within San Bruno Cable and invest in the future. If I had a show of hands, how many people actually watch television anymore, that number is decreasingly dropped. Where do we need to invest our money in is the internet. We want to be able to have Wi-Fi. We want to be able to have dependable Wi-Fi. I'm all for investing in San Bruno Cable. I'd love to have a community that has its own cable company and continues to have it. We've got to figure out a way to, and it is at $10 million, been installed up in Shelter Creek, very successful, and the number of subscribers is increasing, which can actually help pay for the program as well. San Bruno's got to figure out how to install fiber. That is the way of the future.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Salazar.
I do support the continuing investment in our cable enterprise. We are one of the few cities left in the country that operate a cable television system, so we are kind of unique. And definitely, I think every one of the last little companies is feeling the pressure from the large companies, and it's going to be continuously more and more difficult to stay afloat. But as long as we're viable, I would definitely support the continual investment. I think it is a great advantage to our city to have that, and especially the high-speed internet. In terms of how much debt we should incur to keep the program, that's really going to depend on our subscriber base. And unfortunately, it's become sort of a commodity these days, and so not a lot of people are going to be loyal to San Bruno Cable, but as long as people continue to support it and we continue to have subscribers, I definitely support a continual investment.
Thank you. We get into still a lot of questions about the San Bruno's economy. Since this question says, San Bruno's tax base is largely auto and gambling, and other retail things are struggling. Do you have any plans to try to transform San Bruno's economy? Laura Davis, will you start?
Yes. Well, you're correct in that any city is really dependent on its tax base. And I remember when San Bruno Ford went out of business, and they actually left San Bruno because the landlord didn't want to provide them a long-term lease. Boom, they went $1 million. We have a hotel potential across the street from Tanforan. It's not a potential, it's going to happen. That's another $1 million back into our community. If we create places in San Bruno for you and I to shop, to have dinner, to go to, that's again tax revenue back into our city. So we need to make sure that we're investing in promoting businesses that we want to spend our time at, that we want to go to. And so I'm looking forward to a lot more amazing restaurants in San Bruno, the hotel that's coming in, and other new developments, because that's where we need to depend on.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Salazar, next.
Okay, I agree that the city definitely needs to look for other sources because you never know when your cash cows are going to die off. I think the auto industry, they're hurting, and if we are too dependent on our two auto dealers, we could find ourselves in a very bad situation. The gambling part, I don't think that's going away. People are always going to gamble, but we do need to look at the future and start thinking about other types of businesses that are going to keep our coffers full. I don't have any specific ideas on what types of businesses they would be, and it really is driven by the economy and what what the economy bears and what the consumers are willing to do. But we do have some smart people on staff that do this for a living, and I'm sure they would have some really good input on what types of industries we should focus on.
Great. Thank you. And finally, Mr. Durasso.
Two-part response to this question. I think on a small scale, we need to do better as a city and a community to facilitate the process for people to open businesses in San Bruno. I've shared time and time again a personal example, family example of my wife's cousin opening a business on San Mateo Avenue in our downtown. and paying a year of lease, a year of rent on the business, and not able to meet code, not able to get the red tape removed. So they spend a year on a business and they haven't opened the doors. And if they had known that, they would have went to Burlingame, they would have went somewhere else, but they're here. So we need to attract new business. We want them excited and incentivized to be here. On a larger scale, I think we need to better leverage our partnerships. We're remodeling, remolding, and removing different aspects of our city for the Bay Hill Specific Plan. The future is here. It's now. We just have to decide what role we're going to play and how we're going to leverage and benefit from it. Google, Walmart.com, YouTube is right up the street. How do we better leverage those partnerships for our community, for our first responders, for our schools? And they're willing participants, right? We're really going out of our way to remodel the character of our city, but we need to better leverage the partnerships that are already here.
Thank you. Now this is, actually you mentioned YouTube. It says now that YouTube is a significant percent of occupancy in San Bruno, do you have any ideas of how they may be asked to contribute to the community? And Mr. Durazzo?
First and foremost, I work in public education. I work in after-school programming. I work with families. I work with youth. So the quality of our public school system is very important to me. As a community, really the value and the experiences and the education that we give our children is something that's going to pay dividends for decades to come. So that's something that's close to my heart. And I work in the Mission District where we leverage partnerships every single day with our tech community. These folks are here. They're members of our community. We're right in between Silicon Valley and San Francisco. And a natural, I think, segue is public education. I know our public education system here in San Bruno is facing some challenges, and they have great leadership addressing those. I also know they have a $2 million deficit. So I think there needs to be a conversation and really a collaborative effort to really minimize that deficit and work with YouTube to see how they can better fund grade level learning, how they can fund after school programming, how we can get all our kids graduating at grade level. Because if they're not at grade level when they leave our public school system in 8th grade, the odds are that they're not going to go to college. We need to leverage the partnerships to ensure that all our kids are going to college.
Thank you. Ms. Davis.
It's a great question, and I think San Bruno does a lot of reaching out to the different businesses in San Bruno. For example, Recology. I mean, if you're involved in San Bruno, you understand how much Recology gives back to our community. From the Cappuccino High School to programs like Relay for Life, whether it's a St. Robert's Festival, and it's endless. So what can Google and YouTube do? Well, simply give back to our community, especially in our schools, sponsoring programs for the future of tomorrow, and that's our kids. We've got a Parkside Junior High School. We've got a high school in here and lots of elementary schools. Our schools are suffering, so there's lots of room and opportunities for them to get back, and they're doing that, and we're starting to see an increase in that as well.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Salazar.
So YouTube has been involved in a small way in assisting with our schools with some programs they have with field trips and with helping the coding programs in the school. I've seen more and more YouTube employees volunteer at different community events. They funded the Bay Hill Specific Plan in order to be good partners with the city and demonstrate their commitment to working together to build out their campus. And I also see some opportunities there to develop some internships and perhaps inspire some of our local kids to get into technology. They are a big name company and they help put San Bruno on the map. And so I think the more we can leverage them to inspire and become an inspiration to all our kids, we should definitely leverage that as well.
Okay, thank you. Now here's another. There are a couple of development questions. One is quite lengthy, and I'm having a little trouble reading it, but so this was a little simpler, so I'll give you this one first. How do you plan to address the impact of new development on neighboring properties and residents? And Mr. Salazar, will you start that one?
So this subject has become very real to those of us that live near the corner of San Bruno and El Camino, because there is a project coming there, a very large project. And we are concerned in the neighborhood about what the impact would be of having so many more units thrust upon us suddenly. And so we're concerned about parking, we're concerned about traffic, we're concerned about just crowding in general, the impact on the schools, the impact on our infrastructure. These are all things that we're discussing actively, and many of us have been very vocal in attending the meetings, the planning meetings, and letting them know our concerns. We're hoping that the developers continue to be good partners with the city and listen to our concerns and work with us to minimize the impact. We're hoping to have some concessions on creating the right number of parking spots, limiting the heights of the buildings, and creating just general architecture features that complement our neighborhoods and not destroy them.
Thank you. Mr. Girazzo?
Question about development. So the development's coming, and I think we need to be very firm, very clear about expectations. Be clear about the expectations and set the bar very high. We need to really respect the character of our neighborhoods. We need to make sure that we're respecting the retail and folks who are raising their families by having small businesses in San Bruno. And I know the Mills Park development, and this is an example that I brought up time and time again because I think it really cuts to the heart of the issue. When we were at the community meeting, there was a small business owner there, a couple, who said, I don't know anything about this. No one's talked to me. I'm not sure what's going to happen to my business. No one's reached out to me. I've got really vague assurances, but what's going to happen to my business, and how am I going to be able to raise my family when this development comes through? That's not the situation we want in San Bruno. So we want to make sure that we're respecting the folks who have been here serving our community, owning small businesses. We need to respect the expectations that we have about parking and neighborhood character and development. But I think we need to be clear about expectations, and we need to make sure that if the development doesn't fit San Bruno, that we look elsewhere and we speak with developers who really have our city's best interests in mind.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Davis.
So, as he said, development is coming. And you might ask the question, well, why? I like San Bruno just the way it is. I don't want new buildings. I'm concerned about parking. But we're required by law to actually provide new development in our community. Population is only continuing to grow. So I think number one is the community input. You've got to show up to the initial meetings to get your input and feedback on new designs. And I think a great example of a program that didn't go well was the new development of the Grace Honda on El Camino. They came in like gangbusters and said, this is what we want to do, and it did not fit into the community. But guess what? The community fought back. The community showed up, voiced their opinions, and guess what? They left. Another development is happening down at the corner of El Camino and also San Bruno Avenue. Very good meetings. They're listening to us. They're going to go back out. Some issues are probably really the biggest thing is really parking. The design of it looks beautiful. They're trying to make it look like it fits within the neighborhood. I know Mr. Salazar is very concerned because it's directly in his neighborhood, but we do care. I do care if it came into my neighborhood, so we want to make sure that we get your input and design and that we work with the developers because it is coming. We've got to make sure it's going to fit and it's going to look beautiful. And come new development comes great new opportunities.
Thank you. Okay, we're getting down here. What do you think about the right of workers to organize unions for better wages and benefits and job security, particularly for new businesses, and they say such as the hotel? So what's your view on right of workers to organize? Ms. Davis.
Well, I come from a company that's union, and I support unions very much so. My husband's in the union, and when it comes down to union wages are important for San Bruno, right? We want to be able to live in our city and ideally possibly work in our city. And if we don't provide union jobs in our cities, then we don't provide opportunity in our cities. You know, I found it very interesting, especially going door to door knocking, is that we are a community full with a lot of unions, a lot of workers, different trades, and that's an amazing thing. That's what makes San Bruno so special. So yeah, I do support that, and I do feel that it's important to bring in new businesses, especially something like that that's based on union wages.
Thank you. Mr. Salazar.
So unfortunately, we can't depend on corporations to be good citizens all the time. So the ability to organize is important in order for people to maintain a proper living wage. So I definitely support the right of people to organize and defend their common interests. I think that's a philosophy that's embedded in a lot of what we do here, definitely here in San Bruno. Something I definitely believe in, and I fully support that right.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Durasso.
The right to organize is essential and mandatory and critical. We're talking about development. We're talking about the cost of living. Time and time again, I've knocked on the door. I've had situations where I've knocked on the door and I've engaged a homeowner about I've tried to engage a homeowner about a variety of issues, and it breaks my heart when they told me, you know what, I'm not sure I'm going to be here next year. I can barely pay the rent. I can barely afford to live here. My family's in South Carolina, and that's really what I'm looking to go, and I'm sorry, I don't want to waste your time. That's heartbreaking, it's unacceptable, and it's not the way that San Bruno should really treat its workforce. The right to organize is essential, and we really need to balance it with really the cost benefit. The hotel deal has been brought up a number of times, and it's $1 million to our tax base, roughly $1 million. But I also know that there was a hesitation to sit down and talk to organized labor. So we're going to bring a hotel in, and we're going to bring $1 million to our tax reserves, and then we're going to offer subpar, below market jobs to these folks. You can't live in San Bruno on minimum wage. You can't live in San Bruno without organized labor being part of your workforce. So I absolutely support it.
Okay, thank you. This is another question on the growing San Bruno population and housing supply. It says in 10 years, what percentage would you anticipate the population and housing supply would grow or need to grow? And I guess in a way, I'd say how would you address that? So, Mr. Durasso.
I'm going to do my best here, but I had an interesting conversation about something similar, had something to do with traffic safety and parking issues. And I was talking to a fellow committee member, and we were talking about Skyline and expanding Skyline. And then we were talking about my daughter, who's 8 weeks old, and he said, it's very possible that your daughter may never learn how to drive. And I guarantee you that your granddaughter will never learn how to drive. Because he's talking about the automobile and really how it's really possibly in 20 years reaching its apex. So we're looking at, San Bruno houses have one car garage. Now we have a bunch of automobiles. He goes, it may be in 20 years that we don't have any automobiles. And these kind of Ubers that are kind of driving are showing up and picking you up. So I think that really talking about population, it's going to look very different. And I think it's hard to anticipate what it's going to look like. But I think that planning is essential. But I think the future holds some pleasant surprises. And I think that one of the examples that he was using is that folks are going to start using their garages for living space. People aren't going to be stuffing those cars into the garage. So I think it's really looking at these things as a cycle to help kind of plan and envision the future.
Thank you. And Ms. Davis?
One of the things you can certainly be sure of in the peninsula is the further south you go, the warmer it gets. But the further south you go, the more expensive it gets. But San Bruno is sort of nestled into a community that is actually the most affordable along the peninsula. Further down in San Jose, you should see what rents are going for. Along here in San Bruno, it is affordable comparative to what the surrounding cities have. And I think what San Bruno has done is if you look at the passing of Measure N, we have been looking at the future. The city has been looking at that. Hopefully many of you attended the meetings that brought us to a point where we were able to vote on Measure N and the increase in height limit. That is the way of the future. You see it all along the peninsula. You've got commercial space down below with housing above. We have to build smart. We're lucky to have a BART, a Caltrans station, and an airport all nearby. We got to get people out of their cars and into public transportation. So I think that is a way of the future and the way for San Bruno.
Thank you. And Mr. Salazar.
So our transit corridors plan does have some estimates in there about the future growth, and I wish I would have memorized those numbers now. I didn't think it was going to come up, but
1,600?
something like that. Yeah, that sounds right. 1,600. Yeah. So there's already an estimate of how many units need to come in, and a lot of that is mandated by the state. The state tells us we need to put this many units in, so we plan for them. We know more or less where they're going to go. Now, whether or not they get built in the next few years is completely up to the developers, and we are seeing some interest now of the developers to come in and make these units. I'm hoping we do make some affordable units out of those because we do need to start housing our local employees so that we don't have to keep shipping people in from outside of the area and clogging up the freeways, polluting the air. So it's a transit corridor, so we're hoping that we are able to get people in there that can afford to live in the area, take advantage of mass transit, And I do believe we've come up with a good plan, and if we execute on that, I think it'll go off smoothly.
Thank you. So that you'll have time for your closing statements, we're going to make this the last question. And there are a lot of questions about, your education and experience and what skills, and I think you've addressed that, somewhat in your opening statements. But this one says, what would be your most important business, first thing I think you'd think of as a member of the City Council? What do you feel would be most important to you? And let's start with, Mr. Salazar.
Okay. So when this question came up before, I was still thinking that infrastructure was a key component, and it's been important to me. It continues to be important to a lot of people in the city. We do need to fix our roads. We're still underfunding our storm sewer system, and we have a lot of floodplains in the city, so I think that's important. But in these discussions, I've also come to think that perhaps our ability to communicate properly with the public is probably going to be a #1 priority for me if I get elected. We really do need to work on that. It's somewhere where the city has been seriously lacking, and on my previous time on the council, I felt that we could have been doing better to get information out. Sometimes it doesn't always happen. Sometimes there's a reason for it, but I think a lot of times if we were to communicate more openly, we would have a better response from the community. I think the community would feel more engaged, and we could actually make better decisions.
Thank you. And let's see, Ms. Davis.
If you read any of my campaign literature, you'll see things like transparency and communication, and those are all really important things, and I think that talks about who we are as a council. But if I really had to pick one issue as the #1 priority in San Bruno, I actually have to feel it's San Bruno Cable. Because here we have something that has been successful for many years, but it's slowly slipping away. And that's because other companies like Comcast and AT&T are coming in. And I dropped San Bruno Cable. I keep a basic right now because it's not reliable. I need to have something in our community that is reliable, that will take me and be able to get my job done when I'm working from home or whether I'm doing personal things. So I think that's a #1 issue. It's something that is provided lots of revenue for us in years past, and I think it's slipping through our fingers.
Thank you. And Mr. Durazzo.
I think the looming challenge of development is critical to our future in San Bruno. It's an issue that I think really intersects with a lot of different challenges in our city. And again, what kind of development do we want? How are we going to leverage the development? And how are we going to bring it in and mold it and integrate it to our city for the benefit of everyone? Those are real challenges. They touch on housing. They touch on traffic. They touch on parking. They touch on access to affordable housing, right? We have teachers who can't afford to live here. We are talking about union workers. We have union workers who can't afford to live in the city that they serve. We have first responders who can't afford to live here. So I think development is critical. And we need to make sure that we're not overstepping and minimizing quality of life for proud folks who have been in our city for 40, 50, and 60 years. But so it's an issue that we need to leverage, and it's an issue of high concern. And I think that we need to be proactive, and we need to set the expectations very clearly, and we need to set the bar very, very high.
Thank you. So now it's time for our closing statements. And as we drew for the beginning opening statements, we go in reverse order for the closing statements. Each candidate has 2 minutes for their closing statement, and we will start with Mr. Durazzo. 2 minutes.
So when I decided to run for council, I had to get my wife's permission first because we have a little baby at home, as any good husband should. But to be honest with you, I was from a lot of good people and people who had my best interest in mind. They tried to talk me out of it. They said, you have a little baby at home. You're not born and bred in San Bruno. Why don't you learn a little bit more? But you know what? I'm the kind of individual who's really ambitious, excited, and I commit to everything. I jump in with both feet, and I think that's really the shot in the arm that our city needs. I can't speak to prior experience on the council. I can't speak to having family here for 30 and 40 years, but I love the city, and I think that we really need new energy. We need a new perspective, and we need people who are going to look at things in different ways, and we need folks who are going to collaborate. In the work that I do in the Mission District, I'm forced to collaborate with partners from a variety, all walks of life, from folks who have been in our country for 2 to 3 days, to folks who work in our tech industry, and I've said leveraging in a variety of different ways. We need to leverage partnerships. We need to leverage relationships. We need to leverage the collaborative spirit of our city, because the answer is not up here in front of you, right? The answer is me and the council working together with our school district, working with our residents, working with the different committees. So I really bring that energy, and I really think it's the shot in the arm that the city needs. I would have loved to have been born and raised here. Unfortunately, I wasn't, but my children are born and raised here. So I have a stake in the community for decades to come, and I'm excited to serve the city. But I think it's really about folks really willing to roll up their sleeves and try new things and work with everybody, underscore everybody.
Thank you. Michael Salazar, next.
Okay.
2 minutes.
So I want to close with a few thoughts on leadership. In my opinion, leadership is about transparency and it's about collaboration. But sometimes it's about having the courage to make some difficult and often unpopular decisions. With Jim Ruane and Ken Ibarra stepping down after over 2 decades of service to the city, we're going to need some leadership that understands the processes, understands the issues, and is willing to hit the ground running on the first day. I have that experience, and I have a vision for San Bruno that I think a lot of us share, and it's a vision where we can balance the demands of a changing world with our fundamental beliefs in a family-focused community. I want to make sure that we preserve our traditions and the character of the city, and the reasons that we decided to come here or decided to stay here to make San Bruno our home. My commitment to the citizens of San Bruno is just a few basic principles: open, honest, and timely communication, respectful and considerate interactions with all of our residents, continuous improvement of city operations, and fiscal responsibility across all departments. There are a number of things that can divide our city, but I think that there's one thing that always brings us back together, and that's our mutual love for the city that we call our home. So I respectfully ask for your vote so that we can work together to bring a brighter future to San Bruno, both for ourselves and for the future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salazar. Now, Ms. Davis.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank the League of Women Voters for this opportunity tonight. I want to thank again the residents for being here. One of the things I first said in the beginning was that as a resident of San Bruno for over 30 years, I've been giving back to the community. And when I asked my husband, I said, honey, I got to put something on my mailer. What are some good words to describe me? And he says, bulldog. I said, no, I'm not going to go with that one. But really what he means is that when I set my mind to something, I go for it. And I put my whole body in. And I'm a dedicated person. I'm committed. I'm responsible. And I simply care. Why am I doing this? My daughter's 19. My son's 23. It's time for my husband and I to go and enjoy. But I care. I simply care about the community. I was one of those residents who actually the very last day submitted my application for city council. And I did that because simply Councilmember Ibarra is stepping down. Mayor Jim Ruane is stepping down. And all of a sudden there's an opportunity that says, wait a second, we need someone with a voice, someone with history, someone with knowledge. And I feel like I'm that person. I feel like with my 17 years in a water utility company, understanding the way water systems work, which is a lot different from sewer, it's a stinky situation, but that I have the knowledge. My 30 years commitment to whether it's a sports booster program, whether it's the Citizens Crime Prevention Committee, or whether it's the Park and Recreation Commission. I understand how the city works. I understand that simple things that you think are easy to get done are not easy to get done. I understand the challenges with the city. And I do have the commitment, I do have the dedication, and I really hope that I have your vote on November 7th. We all have a choice. You had a choice to come here tonight. And I want to take an opportunity to just take a moment, say a prayer. I came here tonight with a heavy heart because I look at what's happening in our community in Santa Rosa and Napa, and I think, wow, what is going on in that community? And it's difficult to focus on things that are going on for me personally, but it's really about so many families that are suffering right now. So please, say a prayer, take a moment to think about them, and let's hope for a very calm night. And I thank you again for being here.
And thank you very much. Now, before we thank the candidates with our applause, I'd like to say a word about the League of Women Voters. As I said before, we're a nonpartisan political organization, and we have both men and women. It started in 1920 when women got the vote, and in 1974 we decided men needed to be educated too, so we let them in. And so if you're interested in helping with anything like this, we have brochures in the back of the room, but importantly we have our Voters Edge bookmarks, and all the candidates have been invited to put their information up on Voters Edge. It used to be Smart Voter, but it's our new thing now. And they're invited. It's a free service. They can link their own websites to it. So I encourage you to take one of the bookmarks and check Voters Edge. And I didn't check to see if you put it up yet, but we're going to hope you did. So anyway, be sure you check that out. And I would just like to say that I think it takes a lot of courage to get out and run for office, and I really appreciate the people that are willing to do that. And so I think it's time for us to say thank you to them for running.